The family portrait crashed to the floor, glass shattering across my living room. My hand stung where David's fist had connected with my wrist. At 54, I never imagined I'd be cowering in the corner of my own home, watching my husband of 25 years transform into someone unrecognizable. You think you're so perfect, don't you, Sarah? David slurred, swaying slightly, his expensive cologne now mixed with the sharp smell of whiskey. Executive director with her fancy office and all those people who respect you. Meanwhile, I get fired after 20 years of service. 20 years. And for what? Because some young hotshot thinks my methods are outdated. I watched him through eyes that no longer held fear, only resignation. The crystal tumbler in his hand caught the light as he gestured wildly, spilling amber liquid onto the carpet we'd chosen together 15 years ago. This wasn't our first dance, but I was determined it would be our last. That's it, David, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm filing for divorce. I can't do this anymore. His face contorted with rage, the handsome features that had once made my heart race now twisted into something monstrous. The tumbler flew across the room, missing my head by inches before shattering against the wall. You're not leaving me, he growled, closing the distance between us in two long strides. Not after everything I've done for you. Where would you even be without me? What happened next is something I still have nightmares about, even a year later. The bruises have long faded, but the memory of his hands, once gentle in our early years, turned violent against me, remains vivid. I remember thinking, with strange clarity amid the chaos, how no one at the office would believe that David Harrison, the charming man who brought me flowers on every anniversary, could do this. When he finally passed out on our living room couch, I grabbed my phone and car keys. With trembling fingers, I texted Melissa, coming over, emergency. Please be awake. I took one last look at our home. The tasteful furnishings, the awards on the wall, the photographs of happier times, and closed the door on 25 years of my life. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Melissa's kitchen, ice on my wrist, as she called the police. You're not going back this time, she said firmly, not a question but a statement. No, I agreed, watching the ice melt against my skin. I'm not. Flashback. The early years. I met David at a charity gala when I was 29. He stood out in the crowd, tall and confident in his tailored suit, laughing with the mayor as if they were old friends. When our eyes met across the room, I felt a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Sarah Peterson, he said later that evening, appearing at my side with two champagne flutes. Marketing coordinator for Apex Industries. Graduate of Northwestern. Volunteers at the Literacy Center every other Saturday. He handed me a glass with a smile that reached his eyes. I did my homework. David Harrison, I counted, accepting the champagne. Senior investment analyst at Meridian Financial. Graduated Yale. Sits on the board of 3 different charities. I took a deliberate sip. I did mine too. His laugh was genuine, his interest flattering. Back then, his confidence seemed inspiring rather than intimidating. The son of a prominent banking family, he carried himself with an ease I admired. You're different from the others, he told me on our third date, tracing his finger along my cheek as we sat on his balcony overlooking the city. You see me for who I really am. I thought I did. I didn't realize then that David's charm masked a profound insecurity. Growing up with a domineering father who measured love and achievements had left him perpetually striving yet feeling inadequate. His family's wealth had shielded him from consequences his entire life. Dad never thought I was good enough, he confided one night, 6 months into our relationship. We were lying in bed, the sheets tangled around us, his voice soft in the darkness. First in my class at Yale, and he asked why I hadn't applied to Harvard. Made senior analyst in 3 years, and he wondered why it wasn't 2. He sighed, his breath warm against my neck. Nothing was ever enough. I held him closer that night, promising myself I would be different from his father. I would see his worth beyond his achievements. I didn't understand then how that promise would slowly erode my own sense of self. The signs were subtle at first. His irritation when my career advanced while his stagnated, the increasing frequency of his business drinks, the careful way I learned to speak around certain topics. The way his eyes would darken when I mentioned a male colleague. the tight grip on my arm when we disagreed in public. "I'd just worry about losing you," he'd say after each incident, his voice breaking just enough to trigger my compassion. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." By the time I recognized the pattern, we were already 20 years into our marriage, and I had become adept at making excuses for him. When friends noticed my withdrawal from social events, I blamed my busy work schedule. When I flinched at sudden movements, I pretended not to notice their concerned glances. "Marriage takes work," my mother would say during our weekly phone calls, her voice carrying the weight of her generation's expectations. "No one said it would be easy, Sarah." And so I worked harder, loved more fiercely, compromised more completely, until there was almost nothing left of the woman I had once been. At the parents' house 3 months ago, the familiar scent of potpourri assaulted me as I stepped into my childhood home. Mother had been using the same blend of dried flowers and spices for as long as I could remember, a cloying sweetness that always made me feel slightly claustrophobic. "Sarah, right on time," Mother said, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. At 78, Eleanor Peterson remained impeccably put together, her silver hair neatly styled, her clothes pressed and coordinated. She'd worked part-time at the local library for 30 years, more for the social connection than the modest income it provided. "Is something wrong?" I asked, following her into the formal dining room where the good china had been set out. "Your message seemed urgent." "We'll discuss everything over dinner," she replied, her thin hands nervously adjusting the lace doilies she'd placed under the teacups. She still maintained the house with an attention to detail that had been both impressive and suffocating throughout my childhood. My father Richard sat silently at the head of the table, his 80-year-old frame smaller than I remembered, his expression unreadable behind thick glasses. He'd spent 40 years as a mid-level government employee, a man who preferred silence to confrontation. The few times I'd heard him raise his voice were seared into my memory precisely because of their rarity. Jennifer arrived last, looking uncomfortable, but with an undercurrent of excitement I couldn't quite place. At 50, my younger sister had never quite found her footing in life. A series of abandoned careers and failed relationships had left her living in a small apartment she could barely afford, often turning to her parents or me for financial help. "We have something to tell you," Mother said once we were all seated, the roast beef she prepared steaming on our plates. She exchanged a glance with Jennifer, who suddenly became very interested in rearranging her silverware. "Jennifer and David are engaged," Mother continued, a strange, triumphant note in her voice. The fork I'd been holding clattered against my plate. The teacup froze halfway to my lips. "What did you just say?" "It just happened, Sarah," Jennifer finally spoke, a defensive edge to her voice. "We didn't plan it. David and I ran into each other at the fundraiser for the Children's Hospital last month. We got talking, and well, one thing led to another. One thing led to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. I looked from face to face, searching for some sign this was a cruel joke. "He put me in the hospital 3 months ago. I showed you the photographs." David explained all that, Mother said dismissively, cutting her meat with precise movements. "He was under tremendous stress after losing his position at Meridian. You always did have a way of pushing his buttons, Sarah. Always so independent, so challenging." Pushing his, I couldn't finish the sentence. The room seemed to tilt. "He's a violent alcoholic with a prescription drug problem. He emptied our joint accounts before I changed the passwords. He threw me against a wall hard enough to crack a rib." "David is David," my father finally spoke, as if this explained everything. "Men like him, from families like his, they have certain expectations. Perhaps if you had been more understanding of his needs." "His needs?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "What about my need not to be beaten? What about my need for basic safety in my own home?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Jennifer fidgeted with the modest diamond ring I now noticed on her finger, nowhere near the size of the one David had given me. I noted with grim satisfaction. "We're just asking you to be happy for us," Jennifer finally said. "Is that so much to ask from my only sister?" I thought of the Miami vacation I'd planned for all of us. A peace offering after years of strained relationships, 4 tickets purchased with my recent bonus. A gesture I'd hoped would begin to repair the distance that had grown between us. In that moment, I knew I would be canceling those reservations. Yes, I said quietly, setting down my napkin and standing. Yes, it is too much to ask. I walked out without looking back, the sound of my mother calling my name fading as the door closed behind me. The crisis call, 6 weeks later. We need your help, Sarah. Mother's voice was strained over the phone. It had been 3 weeks since I'd walked out of their house, blocking their numbers. She was calling from a number I didn't recognize. A hotel phone, I would later learn. How did you get this number? I asked, standing in my office, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city I would normally appreciate. My assistant had put the call through after Mother had apparently claimed it was a family emergency. Angela gave it to me, she admitted, referring to my cousin. Please don't be angry with her. I told her it was urgent. What do you want, Mother? I kept my voice professional, aware of colleagues passing by my open door. The story tumbled out. They'd gone to a budget beach resort in South Carolina, Jennifer and David's engagement celebration. The first day had been fine, checking in, enjoying the pool, having dinner. But on the second night, Jennifer had gone back to the room early with a headache while my parents and David went to the hotel bar. He said he was going to the bathroom. Mother explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. But he was gone for over an hour. Your father went to check on him and couldn't find him. We thought maybe he'd gone to check on Jennifer, so we went back to the room. Jennifer had walked in on David in bed with one of the hotel staff, a young woman who'd checked them in earlier that day. There had been a scene. David had called Jennifer names, become aggressive. He had shoved my father when he tried to intervene. He threatened all of us. Mother continued, her voice shaking slightly. Said we'd regret crossing him. Then he just left, packed his things, and disappeared with that woman. I'm sorry that happened, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, I wouldn't wish that humiliation on Jennifer. But I don't understand why you're calling me. That's not all, Mother continued, her voice dropping further. The next morning, your father and I discovered charges on our credit cards. Thousands of dollars in cash withdrawals. But how could he access them? We never gave him our cards. You keep your pins written in your wallets, I said flatly, remembering my father's lifelong habit. A small notebook in his wallet where he recorded all his passwords and numbers, despite my repeated warnings about the security risk. We never thought. She trailed off. Sarah, we were wrong. We're going to file charges against him for the theft, but the credit card companies won't reimburse us until the investigation is complete. We don't even have money to get home. Jennifer is devastated. Your father is having chest pains from the stress, and I don't know what to do. A laugh escaped me, not of humor, but of bitter recognition. Let me get this straight. You disowned me, called me a liar, chose my abuser over me, and now you want me to bail you out? We're family, she said, as if those words could erase everything. No, I replied, feeling strangely calm. You made it very clear we're not family. You told me I was dead to you when I refused to attend the engagement dinner. I'm not giving you a cent. Sarah, please. Her voice cracked, a sound I'd rarely heard from my composed mother. Call Angela, I suggested, my tone professional again. I'm sure she'll help you. Goodbye, Mother. I hung up and blocked the number, then sent a quick text to my assistant asking her to hold all calls for the rest of the day. I sat at my desk, staring at the family photo I still kept in my drawer, taken at my college graduation before everything fell apart. For a moment, I felt a stab of guilt, wondering if I was being too harsh. Then I remembered my mother's dismissive tone when I showed her the bruises David had left on my ribs. I remembered my father's silence, his implicit support of a man who had hurt his daughter. I remembered Jennifer's smug expression when she announced her engagement to my abuser. The guilt evaporated, replaced by a resolve I was only beginning to cultivate, the determination to protect myself, even from the people who should have protected me. Aftermath. Building boundaries. The calls came first, from aunts, uncles, family friends. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial sympathy for my situation, followed by subtle and not so subtle pressure to be the bigger person. I know David hurt you, Aunt Caroline said, her voice honey sweet over the phone. But your parents are getting older. They need your help, Sarah. You've always been the stable one. They're adults who made choices, I replied. Just like I'm making mine. I blocked each number as the calls came in, a digital barrier rising between me and the family who had failed me. Then came the unexpected visits. My doorman called up one afternoon. Ms. Peterson, your parents and sister are in the lobby. They're insisting on seeing you. Please tell them I'm not available, James, I said. And they're not to be allowed up. Ever. The most jarring was seeing my father in the lobby of my office building the following week, being escorted out by security as I returned from lunch. Ms. Peterson, I'm so sorry about that, Ms. Mitchell, the head of building security, said as she approached me. He claimed to be making a delivery, but we recognized him from the photo you provided to the front desk. It's not your fault, I assured her, watching my father's stooped figure disappear through the revolving doors. He looked smaller somehow, more fragile than I remembered. Would you like us to add your family members to the permanent deny list? Ms. Mitchell asked gently. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and resolution. Yes, please. And thank you for handling this so discreetly. I did the same at my apartment building, asking the concierge to never allow my parents or sister inside. It felt extreme but necessary. They'd shown they had no boundaries, no respect for my feelings or experiences. As weeks passed, I heard through my cousin Angela what was happening with them. They'd borrowed money from relatives to pay off their credit cards. The police investigation into David's theft had gone nowhere. He disappeared completely, likely with his hotel fling, and hadn't used any traceable cards or accounts since. My parents' bank refused to cover the fraudulent withdrawals since my parents had written down their PINs, a clear violation of the bank's security policy. Your father had a minor health scare, Angela told me during one of our calls. High blood pressure, nothing serious, but it required medication. Your mother picked up more hours at the library to help with the medical bills. I felt a flicker of concern but pushed it aside. They had other family members, other resources. They had made their choice. Jennifer's been having a rough time, Angela continued, her tone careful. She's been diagnosed with depression. She moved back in with your parents after breaking her lease. Apparently, she couldn't afford the rent on her own anymore. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. I didn't wish suffering on my sister, despite everything, but I wasn't ready to be there for her. Your mother asked about you again, Angela added. She wanted to know if you changed your number. I haven't, I replied. I just don't answer. Angela sighed. They really messed up, didn't they? Yes, I said simply. They did. New beginnings. 8 months later, fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and changing leaves. My life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, exercise, dinner with friends, weekend outings. I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with interesting men who made me laugh. Thomas was different from the others, an architect with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that never veered into arrogance. At 58, he'd been divorced for nearly a decade, with 2 adult children he spoke of with genuine pride. What about your family? He asked during our third dinner together. You've mentioned friends, but never relatives. I considered deflecting, as I usually did when the topic arose. But something about his open expression made me decide on honesty. It's complicated, I began, and found myself telling him the entire story. David's abuse, my family's betrayal, the boundaries I'd established. When I finished, I waited for the usual reaction, discomfort, followed by platitudes about family being family. Instead, Thomas reached across the table and gently covered my hand with his. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said simply. It took tremendous courage to protect yourself the way you have. Something tight in my chest loosened at his words. Not judgment, not pressure to reconcile, just acknowledgement of my experience. That same week, I was promoted to Senior Marketing Director, a position that came with a substantial raise and my own corner office. I celebrated by buying myself a pair of ridiculously expensive shoes I'd been eyeing for months. Before, that money would have probably gone to helping my parents replace their ancient water heater or bailing Jennifer out of credit card debt. You deserve this, Melissa told me over champagne at our favorite restaurant. All of it, the promotion, the shoes, the handsome architect. You've earned every bit of happiness. Reflection. The question everyone asks. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them? Melissa asked as we shared dinner a few weeks later. The same friend who'd sheltered me the night I fled from David, she'd been my rock throughout the divorce and everything that followed. I considered the question, taking a sip of my wine. 25 years ago, I would have already forgiven them, already assumed the role of family fixer. It was the pattern established in my childhood. Sarah takes care of everything. Sarah makes peace. Sarah sacrifices. Growing up as the eldest daughter in a traditional household, I'd been raised to be the responsible one, the mediator, the caretaker. My mother had been raised the same way by her mother, a generational pattern of women expected to maintain family harmony at any cost. A good daughter puts family first, Mother would say whenever I showed signs of prioritizing my own needs. I don't know, I answered honestly. They didn't just make a mistake, Melissa. They saw my bruises. They heard my stories. They knew what David did to me, and they still chose him. I've been seeing Dr. Winters for almost a year now, I continued, referring to my therapist. She says I'm not cutting them off out of vengeance. I'm protecting myself from people who've shown they can't be trusted with my well-being. That sounds right to me. Melissa nodded. I just worry sometimes that you're carrying anger that's hurting you more than them. It's not anger anymore, I realized as I said it. Not exactly. It's caution, self-preservation. As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. For so long, I'd carried the weight of my family's needs, their expectations, their problems. Now that weight was gone. I was responsible only for myself, answerable only to myself. The newfound freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. Without the familiar patterns of self-sacrifice and people-pleasing, who was I? What did I want from the second half of my life? These were questions I was only beginning to explore. The letter, an opening. The envelope arrived yesterday, a Friday afternoon. The letter carrier had slipped it in with my usual mail, bills, advertisements, a magazine I subscribed to but rarely had time to read. My mother's neat, teacher-like handwriting was instantly recognizable on the cream-colored envelope. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Sitting at my kitchen counter, I carefully sliced the envelope open with a knife. Dear Sarah, it began. I don't know if you'll read this, but I had to try one more time. The letter was long, 4 pages of my mother's handwriting, front and back. She wrote about how wrong they'd been, how blind. She detailed the ways David had manipulated Jennifer, gradually isolating her from friends, filling her head with lies about me and about their relationship. He told Jennifer you had always been jealous of her. Mother wrote. He said you had tried to control him, that the arguments were always your fault. We believed him because it was easier than facing the truth about the man we had welcomed into our family. She described how, after he left them stranded at that hotel, they found a small bag of pills in the room, prescription painkillers and sleeping aids crushed into powder. We should have believed you, she continued. There's no excuse for what we did. We betrayed you in the worst possible way, and we're living with that knowledge every day. Your father can barely look at himself in the mirror. Jennifer is in therapy, trying to understand how she could have been so thoroughly deceived. She wrote about her own childhood, confirming what I had long suspected. My mother taught me that a woman's role was to keep the family together, no matter the cost. When your father and I argued, I would hide in the bathroom and cry, then come out smiling as if nothing had happened. I taught you and Jennifer the same terrible lesson, that your feelings don't matter as much as keeping the peace. The last paragraph caught me by surprise. I don't expect your forgiveness, Sarah. I'm not even asking for it. What I did, what we all did, may be unforgivable. I just want you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see then. You are the strong one, not me. You broke the cycle that I couldn't break. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for reconciliation. She just asked if someday I might be willing to talk. She included her new cell phone number at the bottom of the last page. I folded the letter and put it back in its envelope, then placed it in my desk drawer. Not ready to respond, not ready to decide. Epilogue. A new morning. This morning, I wake up and make coffee, the routine familiar and comforting. Sunlight streams through the kitchen windows as I check my calendar for the day's meetings. I have lunch scheduled with Melissa, a client presentation in the afternoon, and dinner with Thomas. Things with Thomas have progressed slowly, deliberately. Neither of us is in a rush. At our age, we've learned that relationships are about quality, not urgency. Last weekend, he took me to see his latest architectural project, a community center designed to bring art and music to underserved neighborhoods. Watching him explain the thought behind each element of the design, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. As I sip my coffee on the balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky in pinks and oranges, I feel content, though not happy exactly. There is still a sadness in me for what I've lost, or rather, for what I never really had. A family that would choose me, parents who would protect me, a sister who would believe me. But I've built a good life for myself. I have friends who support me, a career I enjoy, a home that feels safe. I've freed myself from the obligation to constantly rescue people who wouldn't do the same for me. My phone sits on the table beside me, my mother's letter tucked away in my desk inside. Will I ever call the number she left in that letter? I don't know. Not today, probably not tomorrow, maybe not for months or even years. The anger has subsided, that's progress, I suppose. But trust once broken so thoroughly isn't easily repaired. For now, I'm focusing on myself, on healing, on building relationships with people who value me, who believe me, who respect my boundaries. I've learned that it's never too late to start over, to redefine what family means, to discover what I want from the second half of my life. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have that conversation with my mother, to hear Jennifer's apology, to look my father in the eye again. But it will be on my terms, when I'm ready, and with the clear understanding that I'm no longer the family fixer, no longer the bank, no longer the one who sacrifices her own well-being to make everyone else comfortable. At 54, I've finally learned that the most important relationship I needed to repair was the one with myself.